Hi, welcome Brian McGeough from Chatham Wealth Management here at a virtual program here at Chatham Library for financial checklist for the college freshman. Take it away, Brian.
Hi everyone. Yeah, thanks for tuning in. The reason we wanted to do this is, obviously this is the time of year where people are starting to send their children off to freshman year of college. Pretty unique year. Some children may not be going off to college. You may be doing it virtually online. They may be going into the military or their workforce. Really, most of this stuff revolves around um, things that you should be thinking about, whether your child's going to college or not, but as they turn into an adult, from a financial planning or financial aspect. And I've broken this down into three sections. The first is the financials part of it. The second will be insurance. And then the third is some administrative type of stuff. But there's some important stuff in there. It's the shortest part of the piece, but there's a few things that are very important that I've learned, the hard way when I sent my first child off to college. So we'll get started here. Obviously everyone knows, or most people should know about 529s. Maybe you funded them, maybe you haven't. Making a mistake in your withdrawals on your 529s can be pretty expensive. So understanding what is a qualified expense and what is not a qualified expense is a big deal. So, tuition, room, board, other fees that are required of the university or the school, internet access, and also student loans up to $10,000 a year. And then the new thing that has been put in there is you can also pay $10,000 for elementary, middle, and high school for private schools. That's a new thing under the most recent Tax Act. Non-qualified expenses, it's transportation, it's health insurance, stuff like that. What you really need to look at when you're looking at the combined qualified and non-qualified expenses, which can get tricky again, is the on-campus versus off-campus. So on room and board, if whatever the cost of the on-campus is in your tuition or from your school, that's what it is. If you're living off-campus, ask the university, what is their on their website, it'll have the cost of attendance. Whatever that number is, that's what you can use for your 529. The penalty for using 529 money for non-qualified expenses is the earnings portion of your 529 is going to be subject to income tax. So the part that you put in won't get taxed, but the earnings on it from capital gains will, and there'll be a 10% penalty. If you do end up getting a penalty, there is a few ways that you can waive that penalty. If God forbid there's a death or disability, if you get a scholarship, during a year, veterans education assistance, or other non-taxable financial assistance, you can waive that penalty, because if you didn't know you were going to get it and then you pulled the money, you put too much money in, you can pull it back out. And the other thing is, if you do get a refund from your 529 because you ended up getting a scholarship, that's great. You'll have 60 days to recontribute it to another 529. So they'll let you put it back in. And then just some other things. There's a lot of educational assistance programs out there. Some are obvious, some are not so obvious. Most you'll see before you go to school. But there's scholarships, there's grants, there's U.S. Military Academy. When you do your taxes at year end, there's the American Opportunity Tax Credit. There's a Lifetime Learning Tax Credit. Those are actually tax credits, not deductions. So whatever you owe in your taxes, it's a credit. And there's Veterans Educational Assistance Programs. So there's Pell Grants. There's all different kinds of things. The more research you do, you might find other private scholarships out there. Your child can apply to as many as they feel like they have the energy to do, and they might get $500 here, $500 there, but it's it adds up. When you're doing, if you do get some tax-free educational assistance, one thing to keep in mind as you go through your 529 withdrawals, you have to add up all the qualified expenses, subtract that tax-free educational assistance, and that's the number that you're able to take out from your 529 without a penalty. So going, the first 3 pages are on financials, and then we'll get over to the insurance part of it. So for the financial part, for the scholarship part, there's a free application for student aid, FAFSA. It's a government application. Whether you're going to, whether you think you can get a scholarship or not, you should fill this out. You'd be surprised at how much aid is available for students. 70% of students in the country do get some sort of financial aid, whether it's a loan or a scholarship. This comes out in October of each year, and you should fill it out as soon as possible. The sooner you fill it out, the better. The schools have X amount of money to give out, and the sooner you get in there, the more potential you have to get based on their formulas. And a lot of schools require this for their own scholarship. So if you go on to Rutgers University, if you fill that FAFSA out, you'll be eligible for any scholarship money that they might have without even having to do an application. So if you qualify for it, you get it. On the merit scholarships, and this one's important. A lot of these merit scholarships, you need to maintain a minimum GPA 3.0 or whatever it is. I know for one of my kids, they lost their scholarship because their grades went below a 3.0. But what I did is I did call and I asked them I asked the school what happened. I didn't ask my son what happened. I asked the school what happened. You're able to reestablish these scholarships in many cases. They'll put some requirements on it that you got to maintain a certain GPA every single semester to get the scholarship back. But if you're unfortunate, the first couple semesters is a tough one at school. If it's just an unfortunate set of circumstances and it takes some time to adapt and the grades weren't great, make sure you go back to the financial aid and ask them if you can reestablish it. And they'll work with you. And then the last one on the scholarship point side is really if there's a change of financial situation. You fill out these forms in October of last year, and they take your income from a couple years ago, and it's a backward-looking thing. But as we all know, things can change very quickly, as we've seen this year. Many people have seen a loss of income or at least a lowering of their income. Call the school, let the school know. You can fill out an appeals form, tell them what your situation is. They'll ask for some documentation. And if they have the ability and they're in a generous mood, they can change what the financial aid package is. So make sure that you're on top of that stuff, because again, it's a surprising amount of numbers, and a couple $1,000 a semester over 8 semesters adds up, and it's definitely worth looking at. And then going on to onto the loans. Federal versus private. Federal is cheaper. Private's going to charge the high interest rates. So if you can do it, look for federal loans. And then within that category, there's 2 areas. There's subsidized and non-subsidized. So what that really means is if you have a subsidized federal loan, the interest rate or the interest doesn't accumulate until after you graduate or after you start paying down the loan. And you don't have to pay down the loan until you graduate. If you have a non-subsidized loan, you still don't pay down the loan until after you graduate, but that interest is accruing from day one that you took the loan out. In this situation, it's if you're using other forms and you have a non-subsidized loan, and you have a 529, it's better to use the 529 first if you have a non-subsidized loan, because then you're only accruing interest. If your 529 runs out in the 3rd year, you're only accruing interest for that last year. So it's just a little tip that is can save you some interest at the end of the 4 years. And then the last thing that I think is worth talking about is, kids go off to school. A lot of kids, aren't really used to budgeting, saving, investing, paying for food. They don't know how much everything costs. Everything is a swipe, and it's an Apple Pay, and no one really sees money coming in or out of their pocket. But they should know what's paid and what's not paid for. All these schools have money cards, right? And then all these money cards, you have the Rutgers card or the Michigan card. All these cards have a dollar value on them, and you can swipe that dollar value on campus. You can swipe that dollar value at the bar, like all over the place. It's not free money, and make sure your kids know that. The second part about what's paid for, what's not, is the meal plans. If your kid is a picky eater and is not going to eat the cafeteria food, don't get a meal plan. If they want to eat a lot, get a big meal plan, but cater it to what you will use, without trying to buy too much or too little. The food part of it, the extra food part of it can get expensive. And then a couple of things just along these lines. I missed this. I didn't put this in the presentation, but I thought of it when I was signing on tonight. When you get to campus, there'll be a dozen local banks trying to get you to open up local bank accounts for your child. I would suggest that you open up a bank account at a national bank, a city if they have one there, Bank America, something where if your son or daughter is traveling to California or overseas, they're going to be able to access their money without getting hit with an ATM fee. There'll be a city bank in every country, in every city, in every state. If you're using a local Bank of Alabama, you may not really, there may not be a lot of them around. So where you can, try to avoid those local banks and set up the bank account at a big bank. And then that also gives you access if you need to deposit some money. I know everything is wired and sent from here to there, but if you need to actually stop by a bank, you could do that in your town, and just work through it that way. The other couple of things that I think is really important for kids to learn is setting up an investment account. And it sounds daunting, and it sounds like it's going to be a lot of money, but it's a good habit to get into, and it's a good habit to start small and dedicate a certain amount each month that you're going to put into your investment account. Your investment account, you could just put it into mutual funds or ETFs, something that's very easy. I'm not talking about somebody sitting at their desk all day and investing in stocks, but open a Fidelity or a Vanguard or a Schwab or a TD Ameritrade account. And I like to use this example because my kids love Starbucks. $3 a day on Starbucks, and that would be a cheap Starbucks. If you invested that monthly with an average return of 7%, you'd have over $4,600 at the end of 4 years in that investment account. And that's a card down payment. That's that kind of helps. It's a nice little nest egg to come out of college with. With books, this is something that's new since I went to college. You can rent books or you can buy books, depending on the course. If the course is not a major course, rent the book. If it's a course that you're going to need to refer to for the next 4 years, obviously you want to own it. Amazon, Chegg.com is actually a pretty big company that not only does book rentals, but you can sign up for tutoring and some other stuff on Chegg. But there's a lot of resources out there that you should look at that can help your student with more than just finances, but with tutoring and stuff like that. And then the last thing is, the work study programs on campus. You should indicate this on your FAFSA if your child is interested in a work study program. Basically, on-campus jobs. They could be renting camera equipment for the media department. They could be. My son worked the video cameras for the Spartan Vision at the basketball games. They're not guaranteed, but the student needs to find the job, and the average earnings in 2017 was over $2,300. So it's good on resumes that you're busy. Maybe pay for books. When you're a senior, you can pay for some beers. And I think importantly, it keeps them busy and keeps them on a schedule. Kids have a lot more time on their hands at college than they did in high school, and having that extracurricular job is a nice way to make some money and keep them busy. So moving on to insurance, and I've done a lot of research on this. I've talked to my own insurance providers, and a lot of it is experience from what I had to go through, because I had to send off a kid to school that was sick at the time. It wasn't anything serious, but it was a chronic thing that we need to deal with. Check with your provider to see what's covered, especially if you're out of state. If you have a big company, if you're working for a JP Morgan or something, you're going to be fine. If you're working for a local company, a smaller company that has a Blue Cross Blue Shield, that's not as good, and that's Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey. So you really need to find out what's covered. Emergencies are always covered. Your child shows up in an emergency room, that's covered. Your child needs a dermatologist out on campus, and they go to the dermatologist every week for the whole semester. That's not covered under some of these Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey, because it's an out-of-state thing. So understand what's covered. The other thing on that is most urgent care centers are covered under these lesser plans, these Horizon Blue Cross plans. But keep in mind that there's a difference between urgent care and CVS Minute Clinic. A lot of these urgent cares are private facilities, and if they don't code the procedure the right way, it's almost impossible to get it paid for, and it's almost impossible to get it to recode them. And I've gone through that a couple times. And the last thing is the telemedicine stuff, the teledoc stuff. Most insurance providers have it. It's an app on your phone. And so for things that are not as serious, a sinus infection, pink eye, whatever they might get, it's a great way to efficiently see a doctor without having to make a trip down to wherever you would go. The cost is very reasonable. The insurance company pays for it. So it's a really nice thing to have if for minor things. A little bit more on insurance. Schools do offer insurance plans. They're available to students. They have a pretty good cost. University of Michigan, for example, is $1,800 for a 12-month period. It's a very good plan if I wanted to choose it. There are some restrictions, but it's something worth looking into because it's probably a lot cheaper than having your child on, depending on, again, if you're working with a smaller company, it's probably a lot cheaper than having your child on your Blue Cross Blue Shield plan. But it's worth checking into and seeing what's covered. On your auto insurance, if your student's not taking a car with them, make sure you let your agent know. If he or she is 100 miles away or more from home with no car, they'll give you a discount. They're not going to include her as a driver in your family. And as we all know, teen drivers, drive the thing they drive most is your insurance premiums through the roof. And then, lastly, good students discounts, for the college, good students discounts do apply to college students as well. So make sure you get the transcript to your agent each year. If they have over, I believe it's a 3.0, make sure they have it over to your agent, and they'll make sure that they get the appropriate discounts. And then moving on to property and casualty. Look into coverage for laptops, TVs, earpods. These things get stolen all the time, no matter what college. It's a problem. Bicycles, they get lifted from rooms, they get lifted at parties, constantly. For the most part, these things are covered on your home and policy, on your owner's policy, but deductibles do apply. So, if a bunch of stuff gets stolen, and check what your deductible is, and you might be able to get some reimbursement. The other side of this is living in a dorm versus living off campus. Again, if you live in a dorm, again, if somebody steals something, it's on your insurance. But if somebody gets hurt in your child's dorm room, most likely that is going to be covered by the university. If your child gets hurt at your son or daughter's off-campus apartment, that's a gray area. And certainly if there is negligence, your son or daughter has a TV precariously perched on a dresser with an electrical cord running all the way across the room, and someone trips over it, and they get a big gash on their head. That's a liability, and that's where, if you don't already have one, umbrella policies are really pretty good to have. They're out there to protect the assets that you have. So the last thing you want to do is have someone sue you for $1 million and you lose your house and everything else. You can get these umbrella policies, are reasonably priced. And if something happens, obviously if something criminal happened, that's different. But if it's negligence on the part of your child, we live in a litigious society, and whoever's on the receiving end of the injury is going to be suing everybody. So just keep that in mind. And then some general, just administrative things. And these are important because, we're used to all taking care of our kids, prescriptions and doctor's appointments, and we're in the room when they're getting their physicals and everything. Well, when your child turns 18, that's not there anymore. And especially when they're away from home. So if your child has a doctor out at school, have them sign the HIPAA release form so you can get the information. If you call and ask the doctor why they prescribed XYZ medication, they will not tell you. You need to get your child to sign it, the HIPAA release form. They'll give it to them right then. They can designate you as a person to release the information to, but just make sure you get it. It's a real pain. If your kid went to the office and now they're back in their dorm and they call it and they want you to call the doctor, and they're not going to want to walk across campus to sign it again. So just make sure you get that up front when they go to the doctor. Same thing applies with student information from the university. So, the only information that college is going to give you about your student is how much to write the check for. That's it. If you call to ask about grades, disciplinary action, any other thing that's aside from where do you send the check? They're not going to give the information. So your son or daughter has to go in and give you access. They have to sign a waiver or go onto the website and approve you as a person that is able to get information about what's going on with them at the school. And then the last couple things, you don't like to think about these things with your kids, but obviously it's important. Power of attorney and healthcare directives. So, the power of attorney is not as important really if your kid is off someplace and they need you to handle his finances. That's really what that's available for. But the healthcare directive, a lot of silly things go on at school, and if there's a situation where your student gets hurt or can't speak for themselves, if they're 18, make sure you have a healthcare directive so you can direct what treatment they get, as opposed to having to go through the courts and all the other hoops that have to be done. Have that set up front. Have it set up for all your kids. It's a morbid topic. It's one that you don't want to think about. It's one that you hope that you never want to use. But if you ever, in the small event that you need something like that, it's important to have. You want that control. You want to make the decisions for your child's healthcare. So once they turn 18, that power is not yours anymore. So somebody gets dedicated. So. And that's all I have. If you have any questions about any of this stuff or anything that you think that we may be able to help you out with regarding finances, going to college, financing college, saving for college, that's me up on the right there. My email is there. Feel free to reach out. We're right downtown on Chatham. We're a local firm. We've been here since 1978. We're a family-run business, and we're here to help people. So hope this was helpful. Hope it gives you at least one or two tips that you think about, because believe me, you'll be spending 99% of your time figuring out what color mattress, comforter and sheets to get for your child's room. but there's some other pretty important stuff that you should be thinking about as well. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out whenever you want. That's it. Emily, you there?
Thanks, Brian. That was great. I really found it very informative, and I'm glad I'm seeing this 2 years before my son goes off to college.